Pregnant wife in critical condition, millionaire husband is nowhere to be found, with Mistress by his side. What if everything you believed about your perfect life was a lie? Imagine a devoted wife, glowing from pregnancy, racing against time as her health deteriorates within the sterile walls of Mount Sinai Hospital. Picture, too, a multi-millionaire husband whose promises of everlasting devotion vanish in the face of scandal. The stakes are astronomical, no longer just about money or reputation, but about life, survival, and heartbreak. A whisper of betrayal hangs in the air, more deadly than any disease. Prepare yourself for a tale of wealth, secrets, and explosive consequences that will leave you questioning whether loyalty can ever be bought. Emily Caldwell stared at the hospital ceiling, the bright fluorescence invading her teary eyes. She could almost feel her unborn child's heartbeat echoing in her own frail body. Every breath felt heavier than the last, every moment tinged with the fear that her life and the life she carried hung by a thinning thread. Emily had always believed her marriage to Gabriel Caldwell was a fairy tale made real. 6 years ago, she was a wide-eyed college graduate stepping into a swanky charity event in Midtown Manhattan, feeling out of place among the city's elite. Standing before her was Gabriel, tall, handsome, and exuding confidence with every measured step. He'd flashed her an irresistible grin, asked her to dance, and just like that, she fell under his spell. Gabriel was a self-made billionaire in the tech industry. He'd launched a company called Neomatrix Technologies in a tiny garage when he was barely 20. By the time Emily met him, he was on the cover of major business magazines, lauded as a visionary shaping the future. Yet in those early months of their relationship, he was as genuine and down-to-earth as any guy next door. Emily admired his intelligence and drive, certain that underneath the flashy headlines lay a heart of gold. But standing in the hospital bed now, as doctors whispered behind the glass, she recognized how naive she had been. The world they presented to the public, a beautiful union of two souls, philanthropic ambitions, and unstoppable entrepreneurial success, had shattered. Only last week, Emily discovered that her husband had been living another life, not just idle rumors or silly misunderstandings. No, she found damning evidence of his long-time affair with a young socialite named Ophelia, and just when Emily needed him the most, he had vanished. The night before, Emily had collapsed at home, alone after days of constant fatigue, abdominal pain, and a vague sense that something was not right. Paramedics rushed her to Mount Sinai Hospital. Her condition was critical. Complications in her pregnancy threatened both her life and that of her unborn daughter. Gabriel was nowhere to be found. She wanted to believe he was just out of reach, traveling, or in some business meeting. Instead, she learned through social media that he had been spotted in Monaco with his mistress. The blow was as agonizing as any physical pain. Even if she survived this nightmare, how would she ever trust him again? At that moment, Emily received a text message from the last person she expected, Gabriel's top attorney. Not a word from her husband, no concerned call, but a stiff request to cooperate fully and avoid public scandal. The attorney assured her she would have the best medical care money could buy. Heartbroken and furious, Emily realized the extent of Gabriel's betrayal. He wasn't even going to pretend to show up. Her mother, Linda, rushed into the room, eyes red from crying and exhaustion. Linda had come all the way from a small town in Ohio the moment she heard Emily was in danger. She held her daughter's hand, voice quivering as she whispered, "You have to fight, Emily, for you and your child." Although she felt the sting of betrayal and the sting of potential tragedy, Emily resolved to do just that. She was not a woman to let heartbreak define her. She had once been enthralled by Gabriel's charm, but now, in the crisp sheets of a hospital bed, She vowed to fight for the life inside her, no matter how bleak the odds seemed. When Emily recalled her first real date with Gabriel, it made her question every memory since. Had he been playing her from the start, or did something genuinely pure exist between them once? He took her to a candlelit dinner on the rooftop of one of the most exclusive restaurants in New York. The Manhattan skyline shimmered like a sea of dancing diamonds. He had arranged for a private violinist to serenade them, and in that intimate cocoon of sound, he spoke of building a life that wasn't just about money or social standing, but about a commitment to altruism. Emily found her heart fluttering, convinced that fate had guided her to him. 2 years of dating passed before he proposed. And how he proposed, flying her to Paris on a whim, kneeling beneath the glow of the Eiffel Tower, slipping a ring on her finger, tears streaming down both their faces. The ring was a breathtaking piece from Tiffany & Company, radiating a brilliance that seemed to promise them a charmed life. Family and friends were thrilled, media outlets clamored for details on the wedding of the century, and Emily felt like the luckiest woman on earth. And for the first few years of marriage, it really was a dream. Gabriel involved Emily in his philanthropic efforts, organizing charitable galas for children in need, visiting impoverished neighborhoods to provide scholarships and technological assistance. Whenever Emily voiced an idea like donating to local libraries to create digital literacy programs, Gabriel implemented it with gusto. She saw him as a man who used his resources for good. But beneath the surface, perhaps hidden even from himself, something darker grew. The cracks began subtly enough. Gabriel's temper flared at small inconveniences, especially at work. If a deal didn't go through or a staff member made a mistake, he raged behind closed doors. Emily believed it was the pressure of his expanding empire. She comforted him, massaged away his tension, and told him he didn't have to be perfect. He would calm down and apologize, but never in a manner that hinted he'd truly examined his flaws. Then came the extended business trips. Weeks turned into months. He was consulting in Silicon Valley, forging new partnerships in Asia, or attending high-profile conferences in Europe. Emily was left at home, missing him more each day, but there was money and attention, and extravagant gifts flown in from all corners of the globe: handbags, jewelry, exotic perfume. A suspicious part of Emily wondered if he was overcompensating, but she brushed those thoughts aside. She had no reason to doubt him. He always said, "I do this for us, for our future." She swallowed her misgivings, never imagining the double life forming behind the scenes. When Emily found out she was pregnant, she was both elated and terrified. Having struggled with fertility for a time, she considered this pregnancy a miracle. Gabriel seemed happy, but his presence was erratic. He attended doctor visits via video calls more often than in person, always apologizing for the demands of a global enterprise. She believed him and never pressed the issue until the night she discovered Ophelia's messages on Gabriel's phone, the night her entire world collapsed. Ophelia was hardly a secret in the elite social circles. Her presence was easy to detect if one only paid attention. A beautiful heiress from an influential West Coast family, she had been photographed with Gabriel more times than Emily cared to count once she started investigating. Through polite charity functions and glitzy after-parties, Ophelia glided effortlessly among the wealthy. She was everything the gossip columns adored: young, glamorous, with a taste for couture fashion and a smile that made photographers line up to capture her every move. Emily discovered the affair, ironically, on the night she wanted to surprise Gabriel with a special dinner to celebrate the pregnancy. She'd just set the table when his phone buzzed. It was only a few feet away, and the lock screen flashed Ophelia's name. Emily's instinct told her not to look, but her heart pounded with dread. She picked up the phone, read the lurid messages about stolen evenings in private jets, and felt her soul bleed. In a haze, Emily confronted Gabriel. He didn't deny the affair. Instead, he pleaded for time, claiming he was confused, that he loved Emily but also found himself drawn to Ophelia's spark. Emily was too stunned to react. She fled to her mother's for a week, ignoring Gabriel's calls. Eventually, he showed up, tearful, promising the affair was over. He wanted to be a father to their child, he said. Had he truly changed his heart, or was it just damage control? Now, with Emily in a hospital bed fighting for her life, she wondered if she should have left him the moment she found out about Ophelia. Gabriel's betrayal was not some passing fling. It had grown into a twisted relationship that threatened to destroy Emily's health and sanity. Doctors came in and out, hooking her up to IVs and monitoring her vitals. Her condition was too unstable to attempt immediate surgery, yet her unborn child's heartbeat was becoming dangerously erratic. Meanwhile, every nurse who came in asked politely where her husband was. Each time, Emily had to steel herself. Gabriel was not by her side. Instead, he appeared on entertainment news, shows photographed at a lavish party in Monaco, Ophelia hanging off his arm, shining in a sparkly gold dress. It was a knife that kept turning in Emily's heart. While Emily lay in the hospital, her mother, Linda Davis, rose to the occasion. A former schoolteacher from the Midwest, Linda was a small-town woman with a core of steel. She had taught Emily to be kind yet firm, to stand up for what was right, and never settle for disrespect. The news of Gabriel's infidelity ignited a simmering rage in Linda, but she kept it in check for Emily's sake. Rage wouldn't help now. She spent every waking moment in the hospital, demanding updates from the medical staff, sitting by Emily's side, holding her hand, and whispering reassurances. She also left occasional voicemails for Gabriel, urging him to come and face his responsibilities. They remained unanswered. Linda then called upon an old friend who had connections with the New York Times, searching for a way to pressure Gabriel to show up. She didn't yet take that step, unsure if media pressure would help or make matters worse for Emily. To manage the crushing medical bills and ensure Emily got the best attention, Linda had to work through Gabriel's formidable network of lawyers. They were polite, carefully worded, and perpetually non-committal. The lead attorney, Marcus Reed, offered private medical specialists, but there was always a catch: confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure clauses, hush money. Linda felt her throat tighten every time she spoke with them. Was Gabriel so far gone that he viewed Emily as a mere liability? Linda knew her daughter's finances were complicated. Although Emily and Gabriel shared a marriage, so much of the wealth remained in Gabriel's name. He had always promised to provide for Emily, but the prenuptial agreement was a labyrinth of legal jargon, designed to protect his empire. Emily had never objected, because trust was the bedrock of their relationship. That trust now lay in ruins, and Linda suspected that if Emily made too many waves, Gabriel would withhold everything, including her best chance at medical care. It was a cruel irony that Linda would take full advantage of that money, even if it came wrapped in disclaimers and hidden strings. She cared only about one thing: saving Emily and her unborn granddaughter. While Linda was discussing critical updates with the doctors, Emily opened her eyes to a visitor in the room she did not recognize, a woman in a perfectly tailored black suit, hair pinned back. She introduced herself as Regina Park, a liaison from Caldwell Enterprises. Her smile was courteous, but felt rehearsed. "I'm here to ensure that you're comfortable," Regina said. "Gabriel wants the finest care for you, Mrs. Caldwell." Emily forced a bitter smile. "Tell Gabriel, I need his presence more than his money." Regina nodded impassively. "He is currently abroad, tending to urgent negotiations. He asked me to assure you of his absolute commitment to your well-being." Emily felt tears burning her eyes. She was too weak to argue, too disgusted to listen. Regina left a packet of documents on the bedside table and left. Feeling sick to her stomach, Emily tried to breathe through her frustration. All the while, the beeping machines reminded her that time was running out. Behind every mistress, there is often another story, another life that leads her to become entangled in a toxic web. Ophelia Green was born with a silver spoon, yes, but that privilege came with a cold distance from her parents. They left her mostly in the care of nannies, tutors, and boarding schools. She grew up starved for attention, eventually realizing that beauty, charm, and money were powerful tools that allowed her to control the affection she had been deprived of as a child. In her early 20s, Ophelia soared through elite circles, forging relationships with celebrities, venture capitalists, and aristocrats. She learned to read people, detect vulnerability, and slip into their lives like a shimmering accessory. By the time she met Gabriel Caldwell, she was rumored to be dating an older shipping magnate. She moved on swiftly when Gabriel showed interest in her. To Ophelia, men were stepping stones to a sense of belonging she craved. When they ceased to offer what she needed, she moved on without looking back. However, Gabriel's wealth and brilliance intrigued her in ways few men had. He wasn't just a doting benefactor, he was dangerously charismatic, possessing a cunning that matched her own. Their affair was an escape from the pressures of their public lives. Gabriel would whisk her away on private jets, dazzle her with exclusive events, or simply text her late at night to share a stolen moment of laughter. For Ophelia, it began as a thrilling game. Over time, she found a twisted sense of comfort in the chaos of their relationship. She had glimpsed a side of Gabriel that Emily didn't know, a man capable of extreme passion but also volatile outbursts. When Emily's pregnancy became public, Ophelia acted unbothered on social media, flaunting her jet-setting lifestyle, posing in sumptuous fashion. Inside, she seethed at the intrusion. She detested hearing Gabriel speak of fatherhood as if it took precedence over her. Although she had no illusions about him leaving Emily and the child behind entirely, she still nurtured the fantasy that their affair placed her at the center of Gabriel's universe. Then, Gabriel invited her to Monaco for a crucial business trip. She saw it as a chance to stake her claim. She had no idea how dire Emily's condition had become, nor did she particularly care until journalists started calling, asking for statements. That's when something shifted in Ophelia's gut. The scandal threatened everything. She watched the headlines transform from sweet gossip about the philanthropic giant to merciless condemnation of a husband who abandoned his pregnant wife in critical condition. Doubt crept in. The enchantment that Gabriel had woven around her started to fray at the edges. She still enjoyed the lavish attention, but an uneasy feeling stalked her wherever she went. Perhaps she, too, was disposable in Gabriel's eyes. In a towering skyscraper overlooking Central Park, the board of Caldwell Enterprises convened for an emergency meeting. Gabriel's public relations fiasco had not gone unnoticed. The social media outcry grew each day, lambasting him as a heartless playboy who abandoned his wife and unborn child. While the upper echelons of corporate power often closed ranks, this was becoming a liability too large to ignore. Marcus Reed, Gabriel's attorney, led the briefing. He described the negative fallout, the pressure from shareholders, and the potential damage to the company's carefully curated philanthropic brand. No matter how they tried to spin it, the public saw a pregnant woman suffering in a hospital bed, while her husband cavorted around Europe with a mistress. The tabloids had a field day. Even legitimate news sources openly questioned Gabriel's moral compass. Gabriel's absence is unsustainable, one board member said grimly. We need him to return, face the media, and provide a stable narrative. but Gabriel was refusing calls from everyone except Marcus. From Monaco, he messaged that he needed time to think, to gather himself before walking into this storm. Some board members argued that, as CEO, he had a fiduciary responsibility to appear and reassure investors. Others claimed the scandal would blow over if they contained it behind enough hush money and carefully crafted statements. Marcus took a different approach. "We cannot ignore Emily's health," he said. "This is not just a PR crisis. If anything happens to her or the baby, the backlash will be unprecedented." The board was silent. They all recognized the cost of negligence. Guilt might not have swayed them, but they certainly understood a threat to their bottom line. At last, they pushed for a unanimous vote, demand that Gabriel return immediately and address the situation. If he refused, they would consider stepping in as an interim leadership and possibly removing him as CEO. Thus began a flurry of emails and phone calls, trying to drag Gabriel back from his gilded playground. Meanwhile, Emily lingered in the hospital, her condition precarious. She had good days, moments when she could eat a little and talk about the baby's future. She also had days so bad she could hardly open her eyes. The medical team hovered over her, running tests, delivering updates with cautious optimism that the treatments were working. Yet nobody could guarantee a positive outcome. Dr. Serena Marshall was at the forefront of Emily's case. A seasoned obstetrician at Mount Sinai, she knew the delicate balance required for a high-risk pregnancy. Emily's vital signs fluctuated unpredictably. The baby's stress levels rose with each passing day of incomplete treatment. Dr. Marshall believed immediate surgery might be necessary, but the baby was still underweight, and the procedure would risk both mother and child. To complicate matters, the hospital administrators were spooked by the media frenzy. Each time Dr. Marshall recommended a new approach, the PR department insisted on evaluating how it might appear if something went wrong. The last thing the hospital wanted was a tragedy pinned to their name. They also worried about Gabriel's legal team. Would they sue if a surgical intervention went sour? The swirl of liability overshadowed what should have been a purely medical decision. Eventually, Dr. Marshall cornered Linda in the hallway. The older woman was pacing nervously, phone in hand, hoping for news. "We have limited time," Dr. Marshall said quietly. "Emily's condition can turn on a dime. If she has another episode, we won't have many options left." Linda nodded, tears glistening. "What are you suggesting?" "We may need an emergency C-section. There's a window where the baby can safely be delivered prematurely, but it's closing fast. The risk to Emily is high, but waiting could make it even worse." They were stuck. A father's consent was often required for certain life and death interventions, especially under a labyrinth of legal constraints. While Linda had medical power of attorney from Emily's side, Caldwell's attorneys were demanding a say in every major decision. Dr. Marshall felt the weight of bureaucracy stifling her judgment, but she vowed to fight for her patient. That night, Dr. Marshall pulled an all-nighter at Emily's bedside, reading vital signs in real time, adjusting medication as needed, and making sure that if something catastrophic happened, she could act swiftly. She admired Emily's quiet bravery, her unwavering love for a child not yet born into a complicated world. The next morning, Linda brought Dr. Marshall a cup of coffee, hugging her with gratitude. They both hoped a miracle would come. A day later, in a luxury penthouse suite overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, Gabriel sat by the balcony, staring at the scenic horizon with an uneasy sense of foreboding. Ophelia was in the next room, flipping through a fashion magazine, occasionally glancing his way. She sensed his tension, but he had been unapproachable since the calls from his board members escalated. Gabriel felt trapped by his own making. On the one hand, he told himself he deserved this break. Years of unrelenting work had drained him, and with Ophelia, he found a freedom he'd never felt before. On the other, he knew leaving Emily in her condition was morally reprehensible, a betrayal that would haunt him if tragedy struck. The constant phone calls and emails from Marcus and the board weighed heavily on him. He was no stranger to public scrutiny. In his meteoric rise in the tech industry, he had weathered countless controversies and legal battles, but none had ever threatened to unravel him personally. He had once believed that controlling his narrative was as simple as crafting a statement or paying for discreet coverage. Now it felt different. This scandal had a soul, a raw humanity that no amount of money could conceal. Ophelia grew restless, sidling up to him by the balcony with a playful pout. "Are you going to stare at the water all day, Gabriel? We could be out there mingling with royalty and having fun." He sighed. "You don't understand." "Then enlighten me," she said, sarcasm edging her voice. He faced her, struggling to articulate the storm inside his head. "This is all blowing up. The board wants me back. The media is in a frenzy. Emily, I never wanted her to get hurt." A flicker of jealousy crossed Ophelia's face. "You're worried about her, about the baby." She paused. "What about us? If you leave now, you'll be feeding the media circus. They'll say you ran back to your wife just because things got tough." Gabriel swallowed a lump in his throat. "She's carrying my child." Ophelia narrowed her gaze. "You said you were going to divorce her eventually." He recalled uttering such words in moments of emotional confusion when he was desperate to keep Ophelia by his side. But reality was far more complicated. Could he really leave a woman who had stood by him all these years, especially while she was risking her life to bring his child into the world? He tried to explain. "I'm not sure I have ever meant that. I just needed space, needed to figure out what I wanted." Ophelia's expression hardened. "So, I'm just some fling? A little excitement on the side, before you crawl back to your moral obligations?" Gabriel's voice cracked with frustration. "Ophelia, this isn't about you or her alone. It's about a child's life." Silence stretched between them, neither willing to yield. Finally, Gabriel grabbed his phone. He saw dozens of unread messages from Marcus, from the board, from Linda, even from Emily's phone, though he suspected Linda had written them. The last message from Linda read, "If you have a shred of decency left, come to your wife's bedside. She needs you. Your child needs you." His mind spun with conflicting loyalties. He knew the board might remove him if he didn't handle the crisis. He also felt a gnawing guilt that if Emily or the baby died, he'd never forgive himself. Tension mounted. He told Ophelia he needed to make a call. Gabriel landed at JFK in the dead of night. Even then, paparazzi and journalists lined the arrivals area, cameras flashing. They shouted questions about Emily's health, about whether his marriage was over, about Ophelia. Security details escorted him to a limousine, and he sped away without offering any statements. Back at the penthouse in Manhattan, a sumptuous suite they once shared as newlyweds, he felt an alien in his own home. The staff greeted him courteously, but their eyes betrayed curiosity and a pinch of disdain. Word travels fast, especially among household employees who witness the comings and goings of their employer's life. Gabriel locked himself in his office and made calls to the hospital, verifying Emily's status. Linda answered, cold but pragmatic, giving him the medical details. He asked to speak with Emily, but Linda replied that she was sedated. Gabriel felt a wave of shame. He had avoided the confrontation for too long, indulging in a fantasy with Ophelia while his wife suffered. Now, he could not hide. Early the next morning, after a shower and a few hours of restless sleep, he headed to Mount Sinai with an entourage of security and lawyers in tow. They parted the crowds of reporters as he entered the hospital. He found Emily's room, heart pounding. A swirl of guilt, sorrow, and relief overcame him when he saw her, pale and frail, eyes half closed. and the fourth drip snaked from her arm, and machines beeped softly. Linda stood guard, arms crossed, fury etched in every line of her face. Dr. Marshall looked up from the chart, offering Gabriel a tight-lipped nod. Emily opened her eyes at the commotion. She recognized Gabriel's presence and, for a moment, tears rimmed her eyes, but she quickly closed them, turning her face away in silent reproach. She had endured the worst days without him, and his last-minute arrival only amplified the depth of his betrayal. Gabriel approached, hesitating to touch her. He softly whispered, "Emily, I'm here." "I'm sorry." Linda stared daggers at him. "You should have been here weeks ago." He could offer no defense that wouldn't sound hollow. The tension in the room felt suffocating. He tried to speak, but Emily's weak voice cut him off. "Just do whatever you have to do to help our baby," she murmured, her tone laced with resignation. "I don't care about anything else now." Gabriel glanced at Dr. Marshall, who explained the gravity of the situation. Emily's condition had improved marginally, but the risk remained high. A decision had to be made soon regarding potential emergency delivery. Gabriel, shaken, signed the necessary documents, consenting to a course of action that Dr. Marshall believed was best. Linda signed as well, tears streaming down her face. Having secured Gabriel's presence and his consent, Dr. Marshall prepared a specialized team. They'd operate in the next 48 hours if Emily's condition reached a tipping point. Until then, she needed rest and minimal stress. After seeing Emily, Gabriel retreated to the hallway to speak with Linda. She was in no mood for pleasantries. "You abandoned her," Linda spat. "Do you have any idea what she's been through?" Gabriel tried to speak, but his throat felt tight. "I know I made terrible mistakes. Linda's voice trembled with fury. "She's fighting for her life while you were gallivanting with that woman." Gabriel swallowed. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want to do the right thing now." Linda jabbed a finger at him. "If you cause her one more moment of pain, I'll ruin you, Gabriel." "I don't care how much money you have." He nodded, acknowledging her protective rage. In truth, he respected Linda's fierceness, recognizing a reflection of the unconditional love Emily had always shown him. Guilt gnawed at him deeper than ever. Just then, Marcus Reed approached, discreetly handing Gabriel a thick envelope. "Shareholder meeting in 2 days," he said quietly. "The board is panicking. They're demanding an explanation." Gabriel clutched the envelope, realizing he'd have to address the fiasco publicly, presumably while Emily was still in surgery or in critical care. He cursed under his breath. For the first time, he felt powerless. His life was unraveling at a pace he couldn't control. He had lost trust on all fronts: his wife, his mother-in-law, his company. Now he stood on a precipice, faced with the reality that if he lost Emily, no victory would ever matter again. 2 days later, Emily's health took a sharp turn. Monitors beeped alarms and her blood pressure plummeted. Dr. Marshall declared an emergency C-section was needed immediately. The hospital staff rushed to prepare an operating room, injecting Emily with medication to stabilize her vitals. Gabriel stood in the surgical hallway, wearing a sterile gown and gloves, fear gripping him. Linda was there too, clutching a small cross in her hand. The tension was immense, thick like a fog. Gabriel felt uncharacteristically helpless. In the boardroom, he was known for his composure under pressure, an ability to make quick decisions that propelled his company forward. Here, he was a trembling shell of that man, consumed by guilt and anxiety. The staff whisked Emily into the operating room. From the viewing window, Gabriel watched as Dr. Marshall and her team performed the procedure with meticulous care. Every second felt like an hour. The baby's cries finally resounded through the corridor, a fragile sound that both relieved and terrified Gabriel. He looked at Linda, who breathed a small sigh of hope, but the fight was far from over. Emily had lost a significant amount of blood, and her blood pressure dipped dangerously low. while the neonatal specialists rushed the premature infant to the NICU. Dr. Marshall's team worked feverishly to stabilize Emily. Gabriel's heart hammered with each beep of the monitor, each frantic shout from the medical staff. Minutes turned into an agonizing hour before Dr. Marshall emerged. Her face was drawn, but she offered a weary smile. "She's alive. We've managed to stabilize her," Dr. Marshall said. "But she'll need close monitoring in the ICU. The baby is small, but fighting strong." Relief coursed through Gabriel so powerfully he almost collapsed. Linda let out a cry of gratitude, tears streaming. Dr. Marshall then directed them to see the newborn in the NICU, but only briefly. Emily would remain unconscious for a while, her body needing time to recover from the ordeal. When Gabriel peered into the incubator, he felt a surge of paternal love he never anticipated. The baby girl was tiny, covered in wires and tubes, fighting for each breath with a heroic determination. He placed a cautious hand against the glass, tears welling up. He had failed as a husband, but maybe it wasn't too late to be a father. A wave of regret crashed over him. Why had he not been here sooner? He couldn't change the past, but maybe he could shape the future for this fragile life. The day after the surgery, the board demanded Gabriel host a press conference to salvage whatever was left of Caldwell Enterprises' reputation. Their stock had nosedived following endless media coverage of Gabriel's scandal. Failure to address it could spell financial disaster. Gabriel wanted to focus on Emily and the baby, but the board threatened to vote him out if he refused. The press conference took place in the large lobby of Caldwell Enterprises headquarters. Reporters packed the room, cameras poised. Gabriel wore a somber suit, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. He stepped to the podium, scanning the sea of eager faces. Marcus stood off to the side, prepared to handle any legal tangles. Gabriel cleared his throat, feeling a dryness that no sip of water could quench. He began, "I want to address the rumors and stories circulating about my personal life. First, my wife, Emily Caldwell, has been in critical condition. She delivered our daughter prematurely just yesterday. Mother and child are currently receiving the best possible care, and I am deeply grateful to the medical staff at Mount Sinai Hospital for their dedication." A barrage of shouted questions erupted. He raised a hand to quiet them. "I have made mistakes in my personal conduct," he said, the words catching in his throat. "I take full responsibility for them. My priority now is my family and ensuring my wife's recovery." Another explosion of questions followed about Ophelia, about the timeline of his affair, about Emily's ongoing condition, and about whether the board would force him to step down. Gabriel tried to remain composed, repeating rehearsed lines that Marcus had helped him craft. He neither confirmed nor denied the intimate details, but the heartbreak in his voice seemed genuine enough to quell some of the hostility. He ended the conference by stating, "My focus is on my family's health. My personal life should not overshadow the mission of Caldwell Enterprises. But I recognize that my actions have disappointed many people, our employees, our shareholders, and most importantly, my wife. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." With that, he turned away from the podium, ignoring the next wave of shouted questions. The cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing his haunted expression. Gabriel retreated to a private lounge, shaking, tears threatening to slip out. Marcus tried to congratulate him on a decent performance. But all Gabriel could think about was Emily lying in the ICU, uncertain if she would ever forgive him for the pain he caused. Far from the hospital, Ophelia watched the press conference in a lavish suite at the Plaza Hotel. She felt an initial pang of rage upon seeing Gabriel publicly repent. To her, it looked like he was re-establishing ties with Emily, ignoring what they had built. She turned off the television, pacing the room. She had arrived in New York shortly after Gabriel left Monaco, expecting a grand reconciliation. But Gabriel hadn't called. She left him voicemail after voicemail. He never replied. She tried to drop by Caldwell Enterprises, but was blocked by security. Furious and humiliated, she began to realize she might be on the brink of losing Gabriel's favor. Without him, her lifestyle would regress. She despised the idea of returning to her parents' shadow. Ophelia considered her options. She had always prided herself on resourcefulness. Some top tabloids had offered her a fortune for an exclusive tell-all interview. Should she blow the lid off Gabriel's secrets, or would that kill any chance of future reconciliation? She was a gambler, but even she knew the stakes were high. A sly thought crossed her mind. If Gabriel was severing ties with her, perhaps she could leverage a bigger settlement in exchange for her silence. She decided to send a carefully worded message to Marcus, hinting at the scandalous information she possessed. If Caldwell Enterprises wanted to preserve what remained of Gabriel's public image, they'd pay her handsomely to vanish. In the ICU, machines beeped a gentle rhythm. Emily awoke from sedation, her throat dry, her body weak from trauma. She blinked against the bright lights, disoriented. Then she heard a quiet voice. "Emily?" It was Linda, sitting by her side, hand resting gently on Emily's forearm. "You're safe, darling," Linda said softly, stroking Emily's hair. "Your baby is in the NICU, but she's stable." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She tried to speak, but the words came out hoarse. "My baby. Is she okay?" "She's holding strong," Linda assured. "You need to get your strength back, doctor." Marshall soon arrived, explaining that the emergency C-section was successful. Emily was not out of the woods, but was making remarkable progress. Relief mingled with exhaustion, and Emily could only muster a small nod. In the hallway, Gabriel stood anxiously, peering through the door's window, unsure if he was welcome. At last, Linda stepped aside, letting Gabriel enter. He moved slowly, his eyes reflecting a remorseful longing. Emily regarded him with a haunted gaze. The silence between them weighed 1,000 pounds. He began softly, "I'm sorry, Emily. I was selfish. I messed up. I never meant for any of this to happen." She inhaled, mustering the energy to respond. "The baby, that's all I care about now." He nodded, tears prickling. "I want to help. I want to be here for you both." She shut her eyes, overwhelmed. She had loved this man once, perhaps she still did, in some fractured way. But the betrayal, the abandonment cut too deep to ignore. "We'll talk later," she whispered. "I can't right now." Respecting her boundaries, Gabriel left her side, determined to prove his sincerity through actions instead of words. While Emily struggled to recover and the baby fought for life in the NICU, Gabriel's troubles escalated outside the hospital walls. Ophelia's threat to leak secrets to the tabloids roiled behind the scenes. Marcus scrambled to negotiate hush agreements, funneling large sums of money her way, but Ophelia's demands only grew. She threatened that if she didn't get a hefty payout, she would reveal private photos, incriminating texts, and even business dealings that Gabriel would prefer kept out of public view. As if that weren't enough, one of Caldwell Enterprises' largest contracts, a government partnership to develop advanced security software, was suddenly under review. Rumors circulated that the negative PR about Gabriel's personal life cast a shadow on the company's credibility. Investors grew skittish, selling off shares in droves. The stock price hit an all-time low, evaporating billions of dollars in market value. The board held an emergency vote. The majority favored stepping in with an interim CEO, placing Gabriel on an indefinite leave until the scandal died down. Gabriel found himself on the cusp of losing everything he had built. For years, he believed he could separate his personal escapades from his business empire. Now, reality proved otherwise. His personal failings had triggered a chain reaction that threatened his legacy. Emily, though conscious, was too weak to fully grasp the extent of Gabriel's downfall. Linda gleaned snippets of information from news outlets and the hospital rumor mill. She whispered to Emily, "He's reaping what he sowed. I don't want you to worry about that. Focus on healing." Emily nodded, more concerned about her baby's well-being. Though part of her felt a grim vindication, Gabriel had treated her so callously, and now the universe was unleashing its wrath upon him. Another part of her felt sadness. She had once admired his ambition and genius. Watching him self-destruct, even though he had hurt her, wasn't the outcome she'd ever wanted. Days turned into weeks. Emily slowly regained strength, able to sit up and eat small meals. Each day, she visited the NICU to see her daughter, whom she named Hope, believing it encapsulated her emotional journey. The baby grew stronger under the vigilant care of neonatologists. The staff informed Emily that, if Hope continued to progress, she might be released in a month or two. Gabriel remained a constant presence, though not always in the same room. He lingered in corridors, accompanied Emily on her walks around the ward, and watched over Hope in the NICU, silently praying for her recovery. Whenever Emily permitted it, he'd sit by her bed, offering to help with anything she needed. She rarely asked for much, keeping an emotional distance that served as her armor. One morning, Emily felt well enough to converse more openly. She beckoned Gabriel to her room. He entered, an anxious expression on his face. "I need to know," she said, her voice trembling, "why you did it. Was I not enough?" He swallowed. "It was never about you not being enough. I got lost in the attention, the thrill, the idea I could have everything I wanted. I forgot what mattered." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "I nearly died, and so did our baby. Where were you?" He bowed his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I was a fool, caught up in fantasies. I can't undo that. But I promise you, if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life atoning." They spoke for hours, hashing out raw emotions. Emily didn't sugarcoat her feelings, her anger, her heartbreak, her doubts. Gabriel listened, tears in his eyes, admitting his failures with no excuses. Although no single conversation could mend such a massive breach of trust, for the first time, they laid the groundwork for healing. Whether their marriage could endure or not was still uncertain. But they both agreed on one thing: Hope deserved two parents committed to her well-being. Despite his soul-searching conversations with Emily, Gabriel's external problems loomed. Ophelia's extortion demands escalated, and the board continued pressuring Gabriel to step aside. In a bold move, Gabriel decided to confront Ophelia face to face, hoping to end the madness once and for all. He arranged a meeting at a discreet Manhattan restaurant after hours. Ophelia arrived in a designer ensemble, exuding confidence. She offered a half-smile, though bitterness lurked in her eyes. Gabriel wasted no time. "What do you want, Ophelia?" She leaned back, arms folded. "You know exactly what I want. A settlement, a large one. I keep my mouth shut, and you maintain the facade of redemption." His jaw tightened. "I won't be blackmailed." Her laugh was cold. "You're underestimating me. The tabloids would pay dearly for what I have. Even mainstream media would run specials. You might survive it personally, but Caldwell Enterprises? Not so sure." He studied her, noticing subtle signs of desperation. This wasn't just about malice. Ophelia feared losing her lavish lifestyle and any social standing she still had. Gabriel took a deep breath. "What if I offer to pay for your silence, but less than what you're demanding?" She raised an eyebrow, a smirk forming. "Is that your negotiation tactic?" "Beg me to be merciful." "Something like that," he said, voice shaking with controlled anger. "I'm trying to rebuild my life, Ophelia. Do you understand that? I have a newborn daughter who needs me." Ophelia's eyes flickered, betraying a trace of vulnerability. But she hardened herself again. You made me feel special. Then you tossed me aside. You don't get to walk away unscathed." Gabriel nodded. "I know. This is my punishment. Name your final price." She scribbled a figure on a napkin and slid it across the table. It was an astronomical amount, enough to buy several mansions. Gabriel grimaced, knowing it would financially cripple him, but if it meant peace and a chance to save his family, maybe it was worth the sacrifice. As he left the restaurant, settlement papers in hand, he felt an odd mixture of relief and self-loathing. He had sold his integrity to hush up the consequences of his own sins. He consoled himself with the thought that it was for Emily and Hope's sake, to spare them further pain. Yet he knew a part of him would always hate what he had to do. With Ophelia's threat neutralized for the moment, the next hurdle loomed large, the board meeting that would determine Gabriel's future in his own company. He arrived at the conference room in Caldwell Enterprises headquarters, accompanied by Marcus and Linda. Emily was still too weak to attend, but Linda insisted on being present, determined to protect her daughter's interests. The room hummed with tension. PowerPoint slides displayed declining numbers, negative headlines, and anxious investor sentiments. The board chair, an older woman named Miriam Thornfield, opened the discussion with a solemn tone. "We've witnessed a steep decline in share value and public trust. The question before us is whether Gabriel Caldwell remains fit to lead." Gabriel stood, meeting their eyes without flinching. He delivered a heartfelt explanation, taking full responsibility for the scandal. He outlined a strategic plan to rebrand Caldwell Enterprises, emphasizing its philanthropic mission, implementing rigorous ethical guidelines, and bringing in transparency experts to audit the company's operations. He stressed how deeply he regretted letting personal failures harm the business. Some board members were skeptical. "Rebuilding trust takes more than words," one said. Linda then spoke up. "My daughter is fighting for her life because of Gabriel's negligence. Yet I see a man who has finally understood the damage he's done. This company was built on innovation and a spirit of improving lives. If you cast aside Gabriel now, you might lose a visionary who has learned an invaluable lesson, one that could shape the company's moral compass for the better." Her words carried surprising weight, stirring a newfound empathy among the board. They conversed in hushed tones, weighing the pros and cons. Ultimately, Miriam stepped forward with the verdict. "It is the board's decision that you, Gabriel, be placed on probationary status. You will remain as CEO with oversight from a newly appointed ethics committee and an interim co-CEO for 6 months. If performance improves and public sentiment recovers, we will reinstate you fully. If not, we will revisit the question of your removal." The decision was a lifeline, albeit a precarious one. Gabriel nodded, humbled. He thanked Linda for her support, feeling unworthy of such advocacy. She simply whispered, "I did it for Emily and Hope. Don't waste this chance." In the weeks that followed, Gabriel embarked on a relentless campaign to restore Caldwell Enterprises' reputation. He cut deals with non-profits, launched community outreach programs, and personally donated large sums to hospitals, including Mount Sinai. The cynics labeled these efforts as blatant PR stunts. But behind the scenes, Gabriel worked tirelessly to ensure the authenticity of each initiative, keen on shedding his old skin and becoming someone worthy of admiration again, if not from the world, then at least from Emily. Emily, meanwhile, made steady progress. Her physical therapy allowed her to walk short distances. Hope, too, grew stronger, a little warrior forging her way in the NICU. The day Hope could finally breathe without supplemental oxygen, Emily wept tears of joy, cradling her baby against her chest for the first time. Gabriel stood close by, enraptured by the sight of the two people he nearly lost. During this time, Linda returned to Ohio briefly to arrange her affairs, planning to stay in New York longer to support Emily. With Linda gone, Gabriel and Emily found themselves alone more often. They talked sometimes calmly, sometimes with anger and tears. Yet those conversations were seeds of understanding. Gabriel confessed that his affair with Ophelia was a wretched manifestation of his own ego and restlessness. Emily shared how alone she felt when she discovered his betrayal, how that loneliness gnawed at her until she almost lost the will to fight for her life. One evening, Gabriel gently placed his hand over Emily's. "I can't erase the past, but I swear I'll devote every day from here on out to you and Hope." She studied him intently. "I need time to see if you mean it," she whispered. "I need more than apologies." He nodded. "I understand." Though Emily did not promise any formal reconciliation, an unspoken accord formed between them. They would do their best to parent Hope as a team. If something like love still existed between them, it would blossom or wither in the months to come. Neither forced it. Ophelia's quiet departure from the city should have been the end of the scandal. But fate had more twists left. Days before Hope's release from the NICU, a rogue tabloid published a partial leak of Ophelia's photos and messages, presumably obtained through some unscrupulous channel. The story included references to potential insider trading and bribes within Caldwell Enterprises. Although Gabriel had no direct involvement in such activities, the mere mention triggered a federal investigation into the company's finances. Panicked, the board members demanded answers. Gabriel felt numb. Had his moment of atonement been too late? The FBI inquired about suspicious transactions, some possibly orchestrated by unscrupulous employees, using Gabriel's scandal as a cover to hide their own wrongdoing. The fiasco threatened to plunge Caldwell Enterprises into legal chaos. Emily, on the brink of bringing Hope home, heard the news. A strange calmness descended upon her. She recognized that the company's meltdown was a reflection of every misstep Gabriel made, neglecting his moral duties, trusting the wrong people. The sins of the past had an uncanny way of resurfacing at the worst moments. Still, Gabriel fought back. He cooperated fully with investigators, opening books and records, taking a public stance against corruption. He hired independent auditors and fired anyone implicated in fraudulent dealings. To everyone's surprise, the investigators found no evidence tying Gabriel personally to these illegal activities. Several mid-level executives, however, were arrested. The board breathed a collective sigh of relief. Though the scandal bruised their image again, the swift action saved them from catastrophic collapse. In another life, Gabriel might have tried to cover it up. Now he faced it head-on, determined to prove that a new chapter of integrity had begun. Emily watched his transformation, cautiously hopeful. After nearly 2 months in the NICU, Hope reached a milestone weight, and doctors cleared her for discharge. Emily was still recovering, but had regained enough strength to leave the hospital. On a crisp morning, mother and child exited Mount Sinai together. Gabriel was there, arms gently cradling Hope's tiny frame as they walked through the lobby where waiting photographers snapped photos of the emotional moment. Rather than shield himself from the cameras, Gabriel allowed the public a glimpse of sincerity, showing that his priorities had changed. They returned to the penthouse, which Linda had prepared meticulously. A nursery awaited Hope, once an opulent guest room that Emily had redecorated with pastel tones and soft, comforting textures. When Emily settled into the armchair to feed Hope for the first time at home, tears slipped down her cheeks. Gabriel stood nearby, offering silent support. In a tender moment of newfound intimacy, Emily looked up at him. "Thank you for helping bring her home," she whispered. He smiled, eyes moist. "I can't begin to describe how grateful I am you both survived." They gazed at their child, each realizing that, despite the heartbreak and betrayal, Hope represented a chance at redemption. a chance to write a new legacy free from the toxic illusions that once governed their lives. Months passed. Under close monitoring by the Ethics Committee, Gabriel steered Caldwell Enterprises back from the brink. His relentless focus on transparency and philanthropic outreach earned cautious praise from media outlets that once vilified him. Donations poured into various charitable endeavors in Emily's name, particularly healthcare projects supporting mothers with high-risk pregnancies. Emily, still uncertain about the future of their marriage, found solace in raising hope. She collaborated with Mount Sinai to start a program that provided emotional and financial assistance to pregnant women in critical conditions. Her public platform, once overshadowed by Gabriel's reputation, evolved into a beacon of advocacy and support. For a time, Gabriel and Emily lived under the same roof, co-parenting and sharing daily tasks. Their intimacy grew in small gestures, holding hands after a difficult day, reading bedtime stories to hope together, or gazing into each other's eyes with a mix of longing and caution. Though they had not renewed their vows or signed any new legal documents, they tiptoed toward a new kind of bond, forged by adversity and shaped by a desire to protect their daughter's innocence. Ophelia faded into memory. Rumors said she was traveling in Europe, living off the settlement. Gabriel had paid. Occasionally, her social media posts boasted fancy parties or exotic locations. But her star waned, overshadowed by fresh controversies in the socialite sphere. Gabriel never mentioned her name again, and Emily never asked. The story's final twist of karma came when a philanthropic awards ceremony recognized Emily for her newborn health initiative. Ironically, the event was hosted by a foundation that once idolized Gabriel. Now, they chose to honor Emily's resilience and altruistic spirit. Unaware of the full irony, they invited the Caldwell family. Emily arrived, radiant in a sleek evening gown. She still looked a bit pale from her prolonged recovery, but an inner glow captured everyone's attention. Gabriel accompanied her, carrying hope in his arms as they navigated the red carpet. Paparazzi snapped pictures, enthralled by this portrayal of a couple seemingly on the mend. During Emily's acceptance speech, she paused, looking at Gabriel. She said, "I once believed that my life was a fairy tale, and I was devastated to learn that no fairy tale can survive without honesty. But from that devastation came a new awareness and a new purpose, to protect those who are vulnerable, to stand by them when they need it most. I dedicate this honor to my daughter Hope, who showed me the strength I never knew I had." A standing ovation followed. Gabriel's eyes shone with tears, and as Emily stepped off the stage, he wrapped her and their baby in a quiet embrace. In that moment, years of heartbreak and betrayal did not vanish, but they became the soil in which something sincere could grow. A single moment cannot erase all the wrongs and heartbreaks that Gabriel and Emily faced. Yet every day from that awards ceremony forward, they took one more step beyond lies and betrayal, edging closer to a genuine partnership neither had ever known before. While time alone would judge the fate of their marriage, each had learned the cost of indifference and the power of forgiveness. The millionaire husband, who once ran off with his mistress, came face to face with his failings, losing his empire yet regaining something far more valuable. And the pregnant wife, once left in critical condition, rediscovered her own strength, channeling her pain into a cause that saved countless lives. If this story speaks to you, consider the power of redemption and second chances in your own life. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel and spread the hope that every shattered fairy tale can be rebuilt.